I mean, if it's
Some
worth
people,
it, so.
some people, I think, Ron, would be taken aback by your comment, probably largely on the grounds that, and would perhaps say, I will say it rhetorically, but there's no example of, within Christian America, even this very right-wing Christian America, the equivalent of 9/11. However, if you're sitting in the Muslim world, they'll point to the equivalency. They will talk, for example, of the enormous power of Christian Zionism in the United States to shape the whole policy of the United States towards the Near East in a way that they would draw very direct comparisons here to Afghanistan and Iraq, and particularly to the relationship to Israel and the Palestinian people. Wars which have gone on for a very long time and which have been unbelievably costly in terms of human life in those contexts. So I think your point here, in pointing to the BBC series, is one that is far too easy to understand for us. Part of what really interests me about this, if you're game to try and think about this a little bit, how do we, standing on the ground of our faith, how do we respond? What ways do we seek to get at this kind of rhetoric? How can we get around it, get underneath it? How can we change the terms of reference so that, in fact, virulence doesn't build on virulence? I mean, it's so striking to me in the case of the awful shootings that occurred in Arizona recently, for a moment, it seemed like America was arrested by it. For a moment, there was a gasp. But boy, it was only for a moment. You then had the rush of apology, that is, justification, coming from many of the spokespersons, admittedly on the far right of American discourse, but also using religious rhetoric in this process.
Yeah.
And also from the left, you had a kind of, I actually see it as a kind of appetite. It seemed to me there was almost, I hate to say this, sometimes we can have an appetite for how awful the other is in our mind.
Yeah.
And we, in a sense, are relieved that they're that bad because it justifies our way of approaching them over time. So the rhetoric on the left, in some of the talking head radio programs and television programs, and on the right, shared in this kind of posture. I would call it posture. So part of my query here is, what is the posture that we are called to from our faith? In the face of that kind of virulence, how do we not respond in kind? What are the possibilities of changing the terms of reference? What are the possibilities, to put it, going back to my earlier comment, what are the possibilities for us? Let me put it this way. When we turn people into symbols, that's a form of idolatry.
Yeah.
That's called idolatry. It's a classic mechanism of idolatry. What is the stance out of our faith of no longer participating in idolatry, of not bowing down at that altar, of changing the terms of reference, and doing it both with our posture and, I would also argue, with our cunning? Is that a worthy?
Yeah. This is actually, when I was watching the left and the right respond to the situation in Tucson, the first thing that came to my mind was sharks in a feeding frenzy, both attacking the same corpse. And too often that's it. When we try to point out, you know, I often say that moral outrage is a form of confession. But when we're so intent on the weaknesses and the failings and the shortcomings and the sins of others, it's always a form of self-justification, so we can feel better about ourselves, that we're the perfect ones, that we're the holy ones, that we're the perfecti, as the Manichaeans used to say. We're the perfecti, and even better than the auditori, who are around us, you know, the listeners.
The hearers.
And it's, in a way, there's something terribly Gnostic or Manichaean about the mentality itself, about the perfecti and the imperfecti in this world. And what happens is that this intensity, and in this case, the religious right, are nothing but Illuminati. Because they're the illumined ones and everybody else is in darkness, so they have all the secrets and all the mysteries. And they alone have any answers. And it's just that there's no kind of sense of moderation and no sense of the humanity of the other. I do want to give an example because I read, I was asked to say something about it, and somebody sent me a website. And the website answers questions. And the question was, why couldn't you have, well, women you can't have in the priesthood, why can't you have gay people in the priesthood? And the question was never answered. Instead, there was the most venomous outpouring of things that are clearly false, clearly untrue, in a kind of ideological diatribe. But the question was never answered. It was just an ideological diatribe that made accusations. In fact, the whole answer would have been deemed hate propaganda in Canada, and justly so. And but the question was never answered. It was just an outpouring of ideological hatred and malice, filled with falsehoods and misinformation. And the simple answer, in the first place, women are not in the priesthood because the creation of male and female is revelation and prophecy about the relationship between Christ and the church, in which the female is a type of Christ, the male is a type of Christ, and the female a type of the church. That's why marriage is between only a man and a woman in the Orthodox Church. That's why men serve in the altar, because the priesthood belongs to Jesus Christ, not to the priest or the bishop. They're serving visibly the priesthood of Christ in the church. And because the revelation of the mystery of redemption is male and female, then the male serves the priesthood of Christ visibly in the church, and females don't, because then it confuses and corrupts this revelation and prophecy. Now, whether people agree with it or not, you know, that position isn't the matter. The matter is that there is a reason for it, that women are not evil, women are not wicked, women, because they menstruate, are not unworthy. It has to do with revelation and prophecy. And the same thing that marriage is between a male, and the crowning of marriage in the Orthodox Church, everybody can speak for themselves, is between a male and a female only because marriage is a type and likeness of Christ and the church. And anything else destroys that revelation and that prophecy in the creation of male and female. We don't have to demonize, we don't have to make false accusations, we don't have to pour venom, we don't have to spew falsehoods, we don't have to demonize anybody. We have a very clear-cut answer that doesn't have to go into the rhetoric of malice and hatred.
So in this example that you use, the venom is poured forth.
Yeah.
How do you change those terms of reference? Did you enter into it and speak about this as you just have now?
Yes.
Is that,
yes.
Is that one of the things to do? And when that happens, what then happens to the venom?
Well, okay, I started by saying the question was never answered.
Right.
All we heard was
Right. The diatribe.
all we heard was a diatribe.
So then,
All we heard was an ideological polemic,
Right.
but we didn't get the answer.
So
And the
you
answer,
spoke about it?
Yes, and I said the answer is in the revelation of male and
Right.
female.